The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Westlake Academy's music theory classroom, catching dust particles that danced in the air. Jasmine Williams slipped quietly into her usual seat in the back row, hoping not to draw attention. At 15, she had mastered the art of being invisible when she wanted to be. It wasn't that she was shy exactly, more that she had learned the value of choosing when to be seen and heard. The classroom filled with the casual chatter of teenagers. Some compared weekend adventures. Others frantically completed homework due in minutes. Jasmine pulled out her neatly organized notebook, each page filled with her small, precise handwriting. She had spent the weekend studying Bach's counterpoint techniques, fascinated by the mathematical precision behind the music that had always spoken to her soul. Mr. Harrington entered the room with his usual flourish, silencing conversations with his presence alone. Tall and thin with salt and pepper hair, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. His reputation as the school's most demanding music teacher preceded him, and students either feared or worshipped him, sometimes both. Today we continue our exploration of Baroque composers, focusing on Johann Sebastian Bach, he announced, writing the composer's name on the whiteboard with a squeaky marker. Who can tell me what makes Bach's work distinct from his contemporaries? A few hands shot up, the usual suspects. Jasmine knew the answer but hesitated, weighing whether today was a day to be visible. Mr. Harrington called on Thomas, a boy whose father served on the school board. Bach used, a lot of complex structures, Thomas offered vaguely. Could you be more specific? Mr. Harrington asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. Thomas shrugged. He was really good at writing music. A few students laughed. Mr. Harrington sighed dramatically and scanned the room. Anyone else care to demonstrate actual knowledge on the subject? Jasmine took a deep breath and raised her hand. Mr. Harrington's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise before he nodded at her. Bach's counterpoint techniques were revolutionary, she began, her voice soft but clear. He created mathematical relationships between melodic lines that were independent, yet harmonically connected. His fugues demonstrate this especially well. He could take a simple theme and develop it through multiple voices, creating complexity while maintaining perfect balance. The room fell silent. Even the students who normally dozed through class looked up, surprised by the detailed analysis coming from the quiet girl in the back. Mr. Harrington's expression shifted, his lips pressing into a thin line. I see someone's been reading ahead, he said, his tone making it sound more like an accusation than praise. Or perhaps just memorizing the textbook. I actually found some analysis online comparing Bach's mathematical approach to counterpoint with modern music theory, Jasmine replied. It helped me understand why his music feels so satisfying. There's a perfect logical structure underneath the emotional expression. A flicker of something. Annoyance, perhaps, crossed Mr. Harrington's face. In his 15 years teaching at Westlake, he had developed certain expectations about his students. The wealthy ones brought privilege but often lacked passion. The scholarship students brought determination, but sometimes struggled with the fundamentals. Jasmine, with her second-hand uniform and quiet demeanor, didn't fit neatly into his categories, and this seemed to unsettle him. Well, he said, theory is one thing. Application is quite another. He walked slowly between the desks, stopping directly in front of Jasmine's. Anyone can read about Bach's techniques. The question is whether you truly understand them. Jasmine met his gaze steadily. I believe I do, sir. The challenge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. A few students exchanged glances, sensing the tension building in the room. Mr. Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. Interesting. Then perhaps you'd care to demonstrate this understanding in a more practical way. He turned to address the entire class. As you all know, our spring concert is approaching in 6 weeks. We typically feature our most accomplished musicians. He looked back at Jasmine. Ms. Williams, since you appear to be such an authority on Baroque music, perhaps you'd like to perform a piece for the concert. Something suitably challenging on violin, perhaps? The suggestion hung in the air like a trap. Everyone knew the violin was considered one of the most difficult instruments to master, requiring years of dedicated practice to play even passably well. Mr. Harrington's implication was clear. He was setting her up to fail. A few students snickered. Jasmine felt heat rising to her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. The violin would be fine, she said quietly. Mr. Harrington looked taken aback for a moment, clearly expecting her to back down. He recovered quickly. Excellent. I'll put you down for a solo performance. Something by Bach would be appropriate, don't you think? Maybe one of the partitas. They're quite demanding, of course. His tone made it clear he believed she had no idea what she was agreeing to. Actually, Jasmine said, her heart pounding but her voice steady, I was thinking of Paganini's Caprice No. 24. A ripple of whispers swept through the classroom. Even students with limited musical knowledge recognized this as one of the most technically challenging violin pieces ever composed. Mr. Harrington's confident smile faltered. That's ambitious, he said, unable to completely hide his surprise. Perhaps something more suitable for a student performance would be wise. You suggested I demonstrate my understanding, Jasmine replied. Paganini built on Bach's foundation while pushing technical boundaries. I think it's a fitting choice. Mr. Harrington stared at her for a long moment. The classroom was completely silent now, the other students watching this unexpected confrontation with wide eyes. Very well, he finally said, his voice cool. Paganini it is. I look forward to seeing how your theoretical knowledge translates to performance. He turned abruptly and walked back to the front of the classroom. Now returning to our lesson, as he launched into a lecture about Bach's influence on subsequent generations of composers, Jasmine sat very still, processing what had just happened. She had never performed publicly before. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. Yet something about Mr. Harrington's dismissive attitude had sparked a determination she couldn't quite explain. Next to her, a girl named Zoe leaned over. You play violin? She whispered, sounding impressed. Jasmine nodded slightly, not wanting to draw Mr. Harrington's attention again. I've never heard you talk about it, Zoe continued. And Paganini? That's like professional level stuff. Ms. Chen, is there something you'd like to share with the class? Mr. Harrington called out sharply. Zoe straightened in her seat. No, sir, sorry. When the bell rang signaling the end of class, Jasmine gathered her things quickly, hoping to escape before anyone could question her further. But as she reached the door, Mr. Harrington called her name. Ms. Williams, a moment, please. The other students filed out, a few glancing back curiously. When the room had emptied, Mr. Harrington gestured to the chair across from his desk. I want to be clear, he said as she sat down. The spring concert represents this academy to the community. Parents, board members, and potential donors will be in attendance. He leaned forward slightly. If you're not actually prepared to perform at the level you've suggested, now would be the time to say so. There was something in his tone, not quite concern, more like an offered escape route, that made Jasmine's resolve strengthen. I understand the importance of the concert, she said. I wouldn't have volunteered if I didn't believe I could represent the school properly. Mr. Harrington studied her face, looking for signs of uncertainty. The Paganini Caprice requires virtuoso skill. Students typically perform pieces they've worked on with their private instructors. Do you have a violin teacher? Jasmine thought of her grandmother, who had placed a quarter-size violin in her hands when she was just 4 years old, who had taught her to read music before she could read words, who still listened to her practice every evening in their small apartment, offering gentle corrections and boundless encouragement. Yes, she answered simply. I have a teacher. And they believe you're ready for Paganini? They believe in my abilities, Jasmine said carefully. Mr. Harrington sighed. Very well. You'll need to submit your sheet music to the accompanist by next week, and plan to attend at least 3 rehearsals before the performance. Are we clear? Yes, sir. You may go. As Jasmine walked home that afternoon, her mind raced with thoughts of what she had just committed to. The weight of her violin case, which she carried to and from school every day, despite rarely mentioning her musical abilities to anyone at Westlake, seemed heavier than usual. She hadn't lied. She had been playing for 11 years under her grandmother's expert guidance. She practiced for hours every day. She could play the Paganini piece, had been working on it for months, in fact. But she had never performed for more than her grandmother and occasionally their neighbors. The thought of playing on stage, in front of the entire school and community, made her palms sweat. Yet mixed with the anxiety was a strange exhilaration. For once she would be seen. Really seen. Not as the quiet scholarship student who faded into the background, but as herself, the musician who had built her life around the perfect logic and emotional expression of stringed instruments. By the time she reached the apartment building, Jasmine had made up her mind. She would play, and she would show Mr. Harrington exactly what understanding music truly meant. The key turned in the lock, and Jasmine pushed open the door to the small two-bedroom apartment she shared with her grandmother. The familiar scent of cinnamon and ginger greeted her. Grandma Eloise was baking again. Despite working long hours as a night nurse at the local hospital, Eloise Williams somehow found time to fill their home with warmth and comfort. "That you, baby?" her grandmother called from the kitchen. "Yes, Grandma," Jasmine replied, setting her backpack and violin case carefully by the door. She found her grandmother at the kitchen table, rolling dough for what looked like her famous ginger cookies. At 67, Eloise still moved with the grace of the musician she had once been. Her hands, though now marked with age spots and slightly swollen at the joints, worked the dough with practiced precision. "How was school?" Eloise asked, looking up with a smile that immediately faded when she saw Jasmine's expression. "What happened?" Jasmine sank into a chair across from her grandmother. "I'm playing at the spring concert." Eloise's eyebrows shot up. "That's wonderful. But why do you look like someone just gave you terrible news?" "It's Mr. Harrington, my music theory teacher." Jasmine recounted the confrontation in class, her comment about Bach, the teacher's dismissive response, and the challenge that followed. "He thinks I can't do it. He's trying to embarrass me." Eloise's hand stilled. "And what piece did you tell him you'd play?" "Paganini's Caprice, number 24. Her grandmother's eyes widened. "Child, you've been working on that for months." "I know. And you're getting good at it, real good. But performing is different from practicing in our living room." Jasmine nodded, the knot in her stomach tightening. "That's what scares me. What if I freeze up? What if I prove him right?" Eloise wiped, her hands on her apron, and reached across the table to take Jasmine's. "Listen to me. Your mother, God rest her soul, was the same way. Brilliant musician, but terrified of audiences. She'd practice for hours, perfect every note, then get on stage and doubt herself." Her voice softened. "But the time she pushed through that fear, magic happened." Jasmine looked down at their joined hands, her grandmother's weathered by years of work and playing, her own still young but already showing calluses from countless hours with the violin. "I don't know if I can do it, Grandma." "You can, and you will." Eloise squeezed her hands. "Not for that teacher, not even for me, for yourself." Jasmine nodded slowly. 6 weeks to get it perfect." "Then we better get to work," Eloise said with a determined smile. "But first, cookies. Music requires fuel." Later that evening, after dinner and homework, Jasmine stood in the center of their small living room. The furniture had been pushed against the walls, an arrangement they'd perfected years ago to create a practice space. Her grandmother sat in her favorite armchair, the only piece that remained in its usual spot. Jasmine lifted her violin, not an expensive instrument but one her grandmother had found at an estate sale years ago and had meticulously restored. It had belonged to a professional musician once, Eloise claimed, and still carried the spirit of beautiful music within its wood. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine positioned the violin under her chin and raised her bow. She began to play the opening notes of Paganini's Caprice number 24, a piece notorious for its technical challenges. The first variation started simply enough, but soon demanded rapid finger work across all 4 strings. She made it through the first 3 variations before stumbling. Frustration flashed across her face. "Again," her grandmother said gently, "but this time, don't think about the notes. Think about what you want to say." Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. When she began again, something shifted. The notes were the same, but now they carried emotion, determination, defiance, and underneath it all, a pure love of the music itself. When she finished, her grandmother was smiling. "That's it. That's what will silence your teacher." "It's still not perfect," Jasmine said. "The 10th variation will come with practice," Eloise interrupted. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Paganini wasn't mastered in one either. The next morning at school, Jasmine kept to herself more than usual. The story of her confrontation with Mr. Harrington had spread, as gossip always did at Westlake Academy. She felt eyes on her in the hallway, heard whispers as she passed. "Is it true you're playing Paganini? I didn't know she even played violin." "Harrington's going to destroy her." She kept her head high and pretended not to hear. In the cafeteria, she sat alone at her usual table near the window, unpacking the lunch her grandmother had prepared: a sandwich, an apple, and a ginger cookie wrapped in wax paper. "Mind if I join you?" Jasmine looked up to see Zoe Chen standing beside her table, lunch tray in hand. They'd been in classes together since freshman year but had never really talked beyond occasional project collaborations. "Sure," Jasmine said, surprised. Zoe sat down across from her. "So, everyone's talking about you challenging Harrington." "I didn't challenge him," Jasmine corrected. "He challenged me." "Either way, it's the most interesting thing to happen all semester." Zoe took a bite of her sandwich. "Do you really play Paganini?" Jasmine hesitated. Part of her wanted to keep her musical life private, as she always had. But another part, the part that had agreed to perform, was tired of hiding. "I've been playing violin since I was 4, she admitted. "My grandmother taught me. She used to play with the city orchestra before I was born." Zoe's eyes widened. "Seriously? That's amazing. Why haven't you ever mentioned it?" Jasmine shrugged. "No one ever asked." "Well, now I'm asking. How good are you, really?" "Good enough," Jasmine said simply. Zoe studied her for a moment. "You know Harrington's never had a black student perform a solo at the spring concert, right? In all his years here?" Jasmine hadn't known that, but she wasn't entirely surprised. "Is that why he called me out? Because I'm black?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe because you challenged his authority by knowing more than he expected." Zoe lowered her voice. "He doesn't like to be surprised." "Well, he's in for another surprise," Jasmine said with more confidence than she felt. Zoe grinned. "I can't wait to see his face." For the next week, Jasmine fell into a new routine: school during the day, intense practice sessions with her grandmother in the evening. On the weekend, they practiced for hours, Eloise pushing Jasmine to not just play the notes, but to feel them. "Paganini wasn't just technically brilliant," her grandmother explained. "He played with such passion that people thought he'd sold his soul to the devil. That's what made him special, not just the notes, but the fire behind them." By the end of the second week, Jasmine could play through all 24 variations without major mistakes. But her grandmother wasn't satisfied. "You're playing it correctly," Eloise said, "but you're still holding back. What are you afraid of?" Jasmine lowered her violin. "What if I give everything and it's still not enough? What if I pour my heart into it, and Mr. Harrington still looks at me like I don't belong there?" Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up, went to the small bookshelf in the corner, and pulled out an old photo album. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. "Look," she said, pointing to a faded photograph of a young black woman in formal attire, holding a violin and standing on a stage. "Your mother, her first professional performance." She was terrified. The conductor, an old white man who'd been leading orchestras since before she was born, told her she was only there to fill a quota. Jasmine stared at the photo of the mother she barely remembered. What did she do? She played like her life depended on it, and when she finished, that same conductor was the first one on his feet for the standing ovation. Eloise closed the album gently. She understood something important that day. The music doesn't care about the color of your skin or where you come from. It only cares about what you put into it. Jasmine nodded slowly, her throat tight with emotion. "I wish I remembered her playing." "She's in you," Eloise said softly. "Every time you pick up that violin, she's right there in your fingers." She tapped Jasmine's chest. "And in here, that fire you're afraid to release, that's her legacy to you." The next day at school, Jasmine was on her way to lunch when she heard someone calling her name. She turned to see Mr. Harrington stepping out of the music room. "Ms. Williams, a word?" he said, gesturing for her to enter. With reluctance, Jasmine followed him into the empty classroom. "I've been thinking about your performance," he said, leaning against his desk. "The spring concert is a significant event, as I mentioned. If you feel you've overcommitted, there would be no shame in choosing a more suitable piece. Something from Bach, perhaps, as I originally suggested." Jasmine met his gaze. "I'm prepared to play Paganini, Mr. Harrington." He studied her face. "Have you ever performed publicly before?" "No," she admitted, "but there's a first time for everything." "Indeed." He sighed. "Well, rehearsals begin next week. The accompanist will need your sheet music by Friday." "I won't need an accompanist," Jasmine said. "The Caprice is a solo piece." Something flickered in Mr. Harrington's eyes, surprise perhaps that she knew this technical detail. "Very well, but I still expect you at rehearsals to become comfortable with the stage and lighting." "I'll be there," Jasmine promised. As she turned to leave, Mr. Harrington added, "Ms. Williams, I hope you understand that my concern is for the quality of our program. This isn't personal." Jasmine paused at the door. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, music is always personal. That's what makes it powerful." She left him standing there, a puzzled expression on his face as she walked away with her head held high, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "The music doesn't care about the color of your skin or where you come from. It only cares about what you put into it." The auditorium at Westlake Academy sat empty and silent, the rows of plush red seats facing a stage that had hosted countless performances over the years. Jasmine stood alone in the center of that stage, her violin case clutched tightly in one hand. This was her first rehearsal, scheduled before any of the other performers to give her extra preparation time, as Mr. Harrington had put it. Though his words had been professional, Jasmine hadn't missed the doubt lingering behind them. The vastness of the space intimidated her. At home, practicing in their small living room, she could almost forget that real people would be watching her, judging her. Here, she couldn't ignore it. 300 seats. 300 potential witnesses to either her triumph or her humiliation. "The acoustics in here are quite sensitive," Mr. Harrington's voice echoed as he walked down the center aisle. "Many students find it disorienting at first. The sound bounces differently than in a classroom or practice room." Jasmine nodded, trying not to show her nervousness. "I understand. Let's hear what you've prepared so far," he said, taking a seat in the front row. "Just a portion will do. I want to assess where we stand." Taking a deep breath, Jasmine removed her violin from its case and positioned it under her chin. She had decided to play the first 5 variations of Paganini's Caprice, enough to demonstrate her skill, but not revealing everything before the actual performance. The first notes rang out in the empty auditorium, fuller and richer than she was used to hearing. The acoustics amplified every nuance, making her violin sound almost like a different instrument. For a moment, this threw her off, and she faltered slightly. Mr. Harrington made a small note on his clipboard. Jasmine saw this from the corner of her eye and felt a flash of irritation. Setting her jaw, she began again, adjusting her playing to the space. By the 3rd variation, she had found her rhythm, letting the music fill the auditorium as her fingers danced across the strings. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Mr. Harrington's expression was unreadable. "Your technique is better than I expected," he finally said, the admission seeming to cost him something. "How long did you say you've been playing?" 11 years, Jasmine replied. "And your teacher?" Jasmine hesitated. "My grandmother. She played with the city orchestra for 20 years. Something shifted in Mr. Harrington's expression. "Eloise Williams? I wasn't aware she was your grandmother." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "You know her?" "By reputation only. She was quite respected in musical circles before her retirement." He cleared his throat. "That explains some things." "What things?" Jasmine asked. "Your foundation is solid," he said, not quite answering her question. "But there's a difference between technical proficiency and performance quality. The spring concert isn't a recital. It's a showcase. Can you connect with an audience? Can you make them feel something?" The question hung in the air between them. Jasmine thought of her grandmother's words about her mother, how she'd played like her life depended on it, how she'd moved an entire orchestra to stand for her. "I guess we'll find out," she said quietly. Mr. Harrington studied her for a moment longer, then checked his watch. Other students will be arriving soon for their rehearsal slots. I recommend you practice adapting to these acoustics whenever possible. The auditorium is available during lunch periods and after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thank you, Jasmine said, surprised by the helpful information. As she packed up her violin, Mr. Harrington added, Ms. Williams, I should clarify something. I don't set students up to fail. If I didn't believe you had potential, I wouldn't have suggested you perform at all. Before Jasmine could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her to wonder if that had been an apology, a justification, or something else entirely. Over the next 2 weeks, Jasmine spent every available moment practicing. She took Mr. Harrington's advice, using the empty auditorium during lunch periods instead of sitting with Zoe in the cafeteria. Her friend understood, often bringing lunch to the auditorium and sitting quietly in the back row while Jasmine played. You're getting really good at the twisty parts, Zoe commented one day, referring to a particularly complex section of the caprice. Jasmine lowered her violin with a frustrated sigh. It's still not right. The 16th variation keeps tripping me up. Sounded perfect to me, Zoe said with a shrug. That's because you're not a violinist. True, but I am a person with ears, and those ears think you sound amazing. Zoe unwrapped a sandwich and held out half to Jasmine. You need to eat. Geniuses need fuel too. Jasmine smiled despite herself and took the offered food. I'm not a genius. Could have fooled me. Zoe took a bite of her sandwich. So is your grandma coming to the concert? She's trying to switch shifts at the hospital, Jasmine said. It's not easy. She works nights and the concert's on a Friday evening. She has to come, Zoe insisted. This is going to be epic. Half the school is talking about it. Jasmine nearly choked on her sandwich. What, why? Because nobody challenges Harrington, ever, and word got out that you're actually good. Zoe grinned. Thomas has a betting pool going on whether you'll crash and burn or blow everyone away. Great, Jasmine muttered. No pressure or anything. Hey, Zoe said, suddenly serious. You know what's cool? You made people notice you on your terms, not because of what you look like or where you live, but because of what you can do. Jasmine hadn't thought of it that way before. For years she'd been careful to blend in at Westlake, to never draw attention to the fact that she was one of the few black students on scholarship at the predominantly white, wealthy school. Now she was going to be center stage, not hiding, not apologizing, just playing her violin. The thought was terrifying, and strangely liberating. At home that evening, Jasmine practiced while her grandmother prepared dinner. The small apartment filled with the scent of her grandmother's famous red beans and rice, cooking on the stove, and the sound of Paganini's complex notes from Jasmine's violin. When she stumbled over the 16th variation again, Jasmine let out a frustrated groan. I'm never going to get this right. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway, wooden spoon in hand. What's the problem? This section, Jasmine explained, pointing to the sheet music. The transitions between these finger positions are so awkward. Eloise set down her spoon and came closer, studying the music. Ah, I see. You're thinking too much about the notes and not enough about the phrases. Here, let me show you something. She positioned Jasmine's fingers on the violin neck. Feel that? Your hand is tense because you're trying to play each note perfectly. But Paganini didn't think in individual notes. He thought in waves of sound. She guided Jasmine's hand through a flowing motion. Try it like that. Like you're painting one long stroke instead of many dots. Jasmine tried again, focusing on the flow rather than the individual notes. To her surprise, her fingers found their way more naturally, and the passage that had been giving her trouble suddenly felt manageable. How did you know that would work? She asked in amazement. Her grandmother smiled. Because I struggled with the same passage when I was younger. My teacher showed me that trick. Her eyes grew distant with memory. Music is passed down that way, hand to hand, generation to generation. The notes on the page are just the beginning. 3 days before the concert, disaster struck. Jasmine woke up with a sore throat and a fever. Her grandmother insisted she stay home from school. But the concert is in 3 days. Jasmine protested, her voice raspy. I need to practice. What you need is rest, Eloise said firmly, placing a cool cloth on her forehead. You can't play if you're sick. Jasmine spent the day drifting in and out of sleep, worried that her chance to prove herself was slipping away. In her feverish dreams, she saw herself on stage, trying to play while the violin turned to water in her hands, the music dissolving into meaningless noise. She woke to the sound of voices in the living room, her grandmother and someone else. Curious, she dragged herself out of bed and peeked through the crack in her bedroom door. Mr. Harrington was standing in their small living room, looking strangely out of place in his tailored suit among their modest furnishings. He was holding a folder of sheet music. Ms. Williams wasn't in class today, he was saying to her grandmother. I wanted to drop off the program information for the concert. That's thoughtful of you, Eloise replied, her tone polite but reserved. Jasmine is ill today. A fever. Concern flickered across Mr. Harrington's face. Nothing serious, I hope? The concert is not as important as her health, Eloise interrupted firmly. Of course, he agreed quickly. But she has been preparing very diligently. It would be unfortunate if she couldn't perform. She'll perform, Eloise said with quiet confidence. My granddaughter doesn't give up easily. Mr. Harrington nodded. I've noticed that about her. He hesitated, then added, her playing is remarkable. You've taught her well. I gave her the basics, Eloise said. The rest is all her. There was an awkward pause. Well, Mr. Harrington finally said, please tell her that today's rehearsal has been rescheduled for tomorrow. Assuming she's feeling better, I'll tell her. After he left, Jasmine's grandmother came to check on her. Your teacher brought your concert information, she said, placing the folder on Jasmine's nightstand. I heard, Jasmine croaked.
He said my playing is remarkable. Eloise smiled.
He's starting to see what I've always known. The day of the concert arrived. Jasmine's fever had broken, but she still felt weak and her throat remained scratchy. Nevertheless, she insisted on going to school for the final rehearsal. The auditorium was busy with activity, stage crew adjusting lights, performers practicing in corners, the buzz of excitement in the air. Mr. Harrington spotted Jasmine as soon as she entered. Ms. Williams, glad to see you're feeling better, he said, checking something off on his clipboard. You're scheduled second to last in the program. That's considered a position of honor, he added. The strongest performances are typically saved for the end. Jasmine nodded, not trusting her voice. Are you sure you're well enough to perform? He asked, noticing her pallor. I'm fine, she insisted, though her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her violin case. Mr. Harrington looked unconvinced but didn't press the issue. There's a practice room available backstage if you need to warm up before your performance. As he walked away, Zoe appeared at Jasmine's side. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thanks, Jasmine replied dryly. No, seriously, are you okay? You're really pale, just nervous, and getting over being sick. Jasmine took a deep breath that turned into a small cough. But I'm doing this. I have to, Zoe squeezed her arm. Well, I believe in you. And I've got $5 riding on you in Thomas's betting pool, so don't let me down. Despite everything, Jasmine laughed. I'll try not to. As the hours ticked down to the evening performance, Jasmine felt a strange calm settling over her. Perhaps it was the lingering effects of her illness, or perhaps it was simply the knowledge that soon, one way or another, this challenge would be behind her. All that remained was to play, to give voice to the music that had been her companion since childhood, to share it with an audience for the first time. She thought of her mother, whom she barely remembered, of her grandmother, who had given her the gift of music, of Mr. Harrington, who had doubted her, then challenged her, and now waited to see what she would do. Most of all, she thought of herself, the quiet girl who had hidden her talent for so long, now preparing to step into the light. Evening fell on Westlake Academy, transforming the ordinary school day into something magical. Cars filled the parking lot as families arrived for the spring concert, a tradition that had become one of the school's most anticipated events. Inside the auditorium, ushers in formal attire guided guests to their seats while soft classical music played through the speakers. Backstage, Jasmine peeked through the curtain at the growing crowd. The 300 seats were nearly full now. She spotted school board members in the front row, teachers scattered throughout, and hundreds of parents and students she didn't recognize. Her stomach tightened. Looking for someone? Zoe asked, appearing beside her. My grandma, Jasmine said. She wasn't sure if she could get off work. Zoe scanned the audience. What does she look like? Tall silver hair, usually in a bun. She'd be wearing her navy blue dress, it's the only formal thing she owns. They both searched the crowd, but there was no sign of Eloise Williams. Maybe she's running late, Zoe suggested, seeing Jasmine's disappointment. Jasmine nodded, trying to hide how much it mattered. Her grandmother had been there for every important moment in her life. The thought of facing this challenge without her felt wrong somehow, like missing a vital piece of herself. The backstage area buzzed with nervous energy as performers prepared. Some practiced quietly in corners, others checked their appearances in mirrors. A few sat with eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayers or pep talks. Jasmine found a quiet spot to warm up, running through scales to loosen her fingers, which felt stiff with anxiety. Mr. Harrington moved efficiently through the chaos, clipboard in hand, checking details and offering last-minute instructions. When he reached Jasmine, he paused longer than with the other students. "How are you feeling?" he asked. His usual brusqueness softened slightly. "Better," she said, though her hands still trembled faintly. He nodded. "Remember what we discussed about the acoustics? Don't rush, let the sound fill the space." He hesitated, then added, "You've put in the work, Ms. Williams, trust that." Before she could respond, he was called away to solve some crisis with the lighting. Jasmine stared after him, surprised by what had almost sounded like encouragement. The house lights dimmed, signaling the start of the concert. From her position backstage, Jasmine listened as the principal gave a welcome speech, praising the music program and its dedicated teacher, Mr. Harrington. Polite applause followed, and then the performances began. One by one, students took the stage. A pianist played Chopin, a flutist performed Mozart, a cellist tackled Bach. Each performance was met with appreciative applause. Jasmine knew many of them had been taking private lessons for years with professional teachers, their parents investing thousands in their musical education. Most were competent, a few genuinely talented. As the second-to-last performer, Jasmine had plenty of time to grow more nervous. Her mouth dried up, her palms dampened with sweat. The earlier symptoms of her illness, the slight fever, the scratchy throat seemed to return with a vengeance. "You look like you might pass out," Zoe whispered, handing her a bottle of water. Jasmine took a grateful sip. "What if I mess up? What if I forget the notes? Then you'll have a funny story to tell someday." Zoe squeezed her arm. "But you won't mess up. You've got this." A string quartet finished their piece, receiving enthusiastic applause as they left the stage. Jasmine realized with a jolt that she was next. Mr. Harrington appeared at her side. "It's time," he said quietly. Jasmine nodded, gathering her violin and bow. As she moved toward the stage, she glanced one more time at the audience, searching for her grandmother. Still no sign of her. "Wait," Mr. Harrington said suddenly. He pointed toward a side door, where an usher was escorting someone to a reserved seat in the front row. "Isn't that—" Jasmine's heart leaped. It was indeed her grandmother, still in her nurse's scrubs, looking slightly out of breath as if she'd rushed directly from work. Their eyes met across the distance, and Eloise gave her a small, confident nod. With renewed determination, Jasmine stepped onto the stage. The spotlight found her, momentarily blinding her to the audience. She heard Mr. Harrington's voice announcing her name and the piece she would perform. Then silence fell, heavy with expectation. Standing alone in the circle of light, Jasmine positioned her violin under her chin. The familiar weight of it against her collarbone steadied her. She took a deep breath, raised her bow, and began to play. The opening notes of Paganini's Caprice No. 24 rang out clear and confident. The theme, deceptively simple at first, established itself in the hushed auditorium. Then came the first variation, with its quick fingerwork demanding precise execution. Jasmine's fingers found their positions without hesitation, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought might have faltered. By the third variation, she had forgotten the audience entirely. There was only the music, the complex, beautiful challenge of it. Her bow danced across the strings, coaxing out sounds that seemed to defy the limitations of a single instrument. This was what her grandmother had taught her, not just to play the notes, but to speak through them. The 16th variation approached, the section that had given her so much trouble in practice. Remembering her grandmother's advice, Jasmine focused on the flow rather than the individual notes. Her hand relaxed into the movement, and the difficult passage emerged smoother than it ever had before. As she played, something unexpected happened. The music began to feel like a conversation, between herself and Paganini, between the past and present, between the girl she had been and the musician she was becoming. Each variation told part of a story that was somehow both the composer's and her own. In the audience, faces that had begun with polite interest now showed something more: surprise, admiration, wonder. Mr. Harrington, standing at the side of the stage, had gone completely still, his clipboard forgotten at his side, and in the front row her grandmother watched with tears shining in her eyes, a proud smile on her face. The final variation arrived, a triumphant display of virtuosity that had challenged violinists for centuries. Jasmine's bow flew across the strings, her fingers a blur as they navigated the complex patterns. The music soared to its conclusion, the final notes hanging in the air like a question answered, then silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The applause began with a single pair of hands, her grandmother's, and then erupted like a wave, washing over Jasmine as she stood breathless on the stage. To her astonishment, people rose to their feet, first a few, then dozens, until the entire auditorium was standing. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw Mr. Harrington among them, his face transformed by an expression she had never seen there before. Respect, unguarded and complete. Jasmine bowed, clutching her violin tightly as the applause continued. In that moment, she understood what her grandmother had tried to tell her. Music didn't care about where you came from or what others expected of you. It only cared about what you put into it. And tonight she had put everything. As she left the stage, legs shaky with adrenaline and emotion, Mr. Harrington was waiting in the wings. "Ms. Williams," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "That was extraordinary." "Thank you," she said simply. "I've been teaching for 20 years, he continued, his voice quieter now. "I've heard thousands of students play. But what you just did—" He shook his head slightly. "I've never heard a student play with such maturity and depth. Never." Before Jasmine could respond, Zoe rushed over, enveloping her in an excited hug. "That was amazing. You should have seen people's faces. Even Thomas was speechless, and he bet against you." Other students gathered around, offering congratulations and asking questions. How long had she been playing? Who was her teacher? Had she considered music school? Through the crowd, Jasmine spotted her grandmother making her way backstage. She excused herself and went to meet her. "I'm sorry I was late," Eloise said, pulling Jasmine into a tight embrace. "We were short-staffed and I couldn't leave until my replacement arrived." "You made it," Jasmine said, breathing in the familiar scent of her grandmother's perfume mixed with hospital antiseptic. "That's all that matters." "You played beautifully," Eloise whispered. "Your mother would have been so proud." They held each other as the concert concluded with the final performance, neither paying much attention to it. This moment belonged to them, to the legacy of music that had sustained their family through generations. After the concert, as the audience filtered out into the night, a distinguished-looking woman approached Jasmine and her grandmother. She introduced herself as the director of the State Youth Symphony. "I come to these school concerts occasionally, looking for promising talents," she explained. "I wasn't expecting to hear playing of your caliber tonight." She handed Jasmine a card. "We'd like to offer you an audition for our program. It includes a full scholarship for lessons and summer intensives." Jasmine stared at the card, stunned. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I'd be honored." As the woman walked away, Mr. Harrington appeared again. He looked different somehow. The stern authority figure transformed into simply a man reconsidering long-held assumptions. "Ms. Williams," he said, addressing Eloise this time, "your granddaughter has remarkable talent. With your permission, I'd like to work with her on more advanced repertoire for next year's competitions." "I think that would be Jasmine's decision," Eloise replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. They both looked at Jasmine, who suddenly realized how much had changed in the past hour. The quiet girl who had tried to be invisible now stood in a spotlight of her own making. The teacher who had tried to put her in her place now asked for the privilege of teaching her. The future that had once seemed so limited now opened with possibilities. "I'd like that," she said finally, "but I have conditions." Mr. Harrington raised an eyebrow but nodded for her to continue. "I want to help start a music mentorship program," Jasmine said, the idea forming as she spoke. "For students who can't afford private lessons. My grandmother taught me that music belongs to everyone, not just those who can pay for it." A smile spread slowly across Eloise's face. Mr. Harrington considered for a moment, then extended his hand. "It seems I have much to learn from both Williams women," he said. As they shook hands, Jasmine felt something shift into place, a new understanding, a new beginning. The violin case in her hand no longer felt like a secret to be kept, but a gift to be shared. The music that had once been her private refuge would now become her public voice, and it was a voice that would be heard. 1 month after the spring concert, Westlake Academy buzzed with end-of-year energy. Students cleaned out lockers, signed yearbooks, and made summer plans. For most, it was just another school year ending. For Jasmine Williams, it marked the beginning of a completely new chapter in her life. She stood in the music room after school, helping Mr. Harrington sort through applications for what they now called the Westlake Music Mentorship Program. The idea that had sparked on the night of her performance had quickly grown into something real, a program designed to connect musically talented students who couldn't afford private lessons with volunteer teachers and musicians from the community. "I think we have enough mentors for the first semester," Mr. Harrington said, reviewing the list. 15 professional musicians, including 3 from the city orchestra. He glanced at Jasmine with something like respect. "Your grandmother was quite persuasive." Jasmine smiled, remembering how Eloise had reached out to her old orchestra connections, convincing many of them to volunteer their time. "She believes in the program." "As do I," Mr. Harrington admitted. "Though I must confess I wouldn't have considered it without your encouragement." His careful choice of words made Jasmine laugh. They both knew encouragement was a polite way of describing how she had essentially challenged his entire approach to music education. To his credit, once he had gotten over his initial defensiveness, Mr. Harrington had become the program's biggest advocate, even securing funding from the school board. "Have you decided about the youth symphony?" he asked, changing the subject. Jasmine nodded. "I auditioned last week. They offered me a spot for the fall season." "Excellent." He arranged the applications into a neat stack. "With the right guidance, you could be looking at Juilliard in a few years." The casual mention of one of the world's most prestigious music schools still felt surreal to Jasmine. Before the concert, her horizon had extended only as far as possibly getting a music scholarship to a state university. Now people spoke of conservatories and international competitions as if they were natural steps in her future. "One step at a time," she said, echoing her grandmother's practical advice. Mr. Harrington checked his watch. "You should get going. Don't you have a lesson with Mrs. Chen today?" This was another change. After hearing about Jasmine's performance, Zoe's mother, a professional violinist who taught at the community college, had offered to give her weekly lessons to supplement her grandmother's teaching. It was the kind of opportunity Jasmine would never have had access to before. "Yes, at 4 o'clock, Jasmine confirmed, gathering her belongings. As she turned to leave, Mr. Harrington called after her. "Ms. Williams?" She paused at the door. "Yes?" He seemed to struggle with what he wanted to say. "I owe you an apology. When I challenged you that day in class, it wasn't my finest moment as an educator." Jasmine hadn't expected this. In the weeks since the concert, they had worked together on the mentorship program and her continued musical education, but neither had directly addressed what had happened before. "Why did you do it?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question carefully. "I'd like to say it was because I saw potential in you that needed pushing, but the truth is more complicated." He sat on the edge of his desk. "I've been teaching for 20 years, and I thought I could size up a student's abilities at a glance. When you spoke about Bach with such insight, it challenged my assumptions. Because I'm black? Or because I'm on scholarship? Both, perhaps." He looked uncomfortable but continued. "I didn't expect you to know what you knew or to play the way you played. That says more about my limitations than yours." Jasmine nodded, appreciating his honesty. "My grandma says sometimes people need to be surprised before they can learn something new." "Your grandmother is a wise woman." He straightened, returning to his more familiar professional demeanor. "Now don't keep Mrs. Chen waiting." Outside, the late spring sunshine warmed Jasmine's face as she walked across campus. Other students greeted her as she passed. Many who had never noticed her before the concert now knew her by name. She had gone from invisible to recognized in the span of one evening. Zoe was waiting for her at the school gates, scrolling through her phone. "There you are. Mom texted asking if you could come a little earlier. She wants to record your Tchaikovsky for your symphony application. I'm not sure it's ready, Jasmine said as they fell into step together. Mom says it's ready, Zoe countered. And when it comes to violin, what Mom says goes. As they walked the familiar route to Zoe's house, they passed the local coffee shop where a poster caught Jasmine's eye. She stopped to read it. Community benefit concert, she read aloud, featuring local musicians playing to raise funds for arts education in underserved schools. Zoe peered over her shoulder. Hey, that's next month. You should totally play. I don't know. Jasmine hesitated. Come on. After Westlake's concert? This would be nothing for you. Zoe pulled out her phone. I'm taking a picture of this to show Mom. She probably knows the organizers. As they continued walking, Jasmine's thoughts drifted to how quickly her life had changed. Just months ago, the idea of performing in public had terrified her. Now she was considering volunteering for another concert, not because anyone had challenged or doubted her, but because she wanted to share her music. They arrived at Zoe's house, a comfortable 2-story home with a dedicated music room where Mrs. Chen taught her students. Unlike Jasmine's first lesson, which had been filled with nervous tension, she now looked forward to these sessions. Mrs. Chen was strict but encouraging, pushing Jasmine to refine her technique while respecting the foundation her grandmother had built. Before we start, Mrs. Chen said after greeting them, I have news. The director of the Youth Symphony called me. They were very impressed with your audition, Jasmine. So impressed that they want to feature you as a soloist in their fall concert. Jasmine's jaw dropped. A soloist? But I just joined. Exceptional talent deserves exceptional opportunities, Mrs. Chen said matter-of-factly. They're considering the Bruch Violin Concerto. We should begin working on it immediately. As the lesson progressed, Jasmine felt a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. 6 months ago, her violin had been her private joy, something she shared only with her grandmother in their small apartment. Now it was opening doors she hadn't known existed. Later that evening, Jasmine sat at their kitchen table with her grandmother, sharing the news about the Youth Symphony's offer. A soloist, Eloise repeated, her eyes shining with pride. Your mother was 20 before she earned her first solo with the orchestra. I'm scared, Grandma, Jasmine admitted. Everything's happening so fast. What if I'm not ready? Eloise reached across the table to take her hand. You've been ready your whole life, child. The world just wasn't paying attention until now. But what if I fail? What if I disappoint everyone? Then you'll get up and try again, her grandmother said simply. That's what musicians do. That's what your mother did. That's what I did. And that's what you'll do. Jasmine nodded, drawing strength from the generations of strong women who had come before her. Mrs. Chen wants me to practice 4 hours a day this summer to prepare. Then that's what you'll do, Eloise said. And I'll be right here, listening to every note. The next day at school, the last day before summer break, Jasmine found a small package in her locker. Inside was a book about famous black classical musicians throughout history, with a note tucked inside. Ms. Williams, I thought you might find inspiration in the stories of these artists who, like you, refuse to be limited by others' expectations. Enjoy your summer of music. Mr. Harrington. Jasmine flipped through the pages, recognizing some names and discovering others for the first time. She read about violinists who had broken barriers, pianists who had transformed how classical music was performed, conductors who had changed which pieces were considered worthy of the great concert halls. What's that? Zoe asked, appearing beside her. A gift from Mr. Harrington, Jasmine explained, showing her the book. Zoe raised her eyebrows. Wow, you really did change him. I don't know about that, Jasmine said. Maybe we changed each other. As they walked to their final class of the year, Jasmine thought about change, how it could come suddenly, like her moment on stage, or gradually, like Mr. Harrington's evolving perspective. She thought about her mother, who had faced her own challenges in the music world, about her grandmother, who had given up her career to raise her daughter and then her granddaughter, passing on the gift of music through generations. Most of all, she thought about herself, who she had been 6 months ago and who she was becoming now. The quiet girl who had hidden her talent was gone. In her place was a young musician who had found her voice, not just in music but in life. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, students poured out of classrooms, celebrating the start of summer freedom. Jasmine joined the crowd, but her mind was already elsewhere. On the Bruch concerto she would begin learning, on the community concert she might perform in, on the mentorship program that would start in the fall. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandmother. "Don't forget we're meeting with the youth symphony director at 5. Bring your calendar so we can plan your summer schedule." Jasmine smiled as she typed her reply, "On my way. Bringing big dreams too." As she left the school grounds, violin case in hand, she paused to look back at the building where everything had changed. The place where a teacher had challenged her, thinking to put her in her place, only to discover that her place was center stage. The spring sunlight caught the polished wood of her violin case, and for a moment Jasmine thought she could hear music, not just the notes of Paganini or Bruch or Tchaikovsky, but something new and unwritten, her own composition, still in progress, full of challenges overcome and possibilities ahead. It was the sound of a door opening, the sound of barriers breaking, the sound of talent recognized and nurtured rather than dismissed or doubted. It was the sound of change, the most beautiful music of all.